Monosyllabic responses, that's what you're going for, right? Just like quick and dirty.
You know, I don't even want you to care about this. I don't need someone. Yeah. No, I don't need two people who are just gracious and grateful and lovely, generally, like, not only likable, but genuinely lovable. I don't need that.
Not for you right now.
It's just not the brand of A Star Is Born.
That's not what we do here. We like to tear people apart, and we get off on it. It's great.
Yeah. Being cruel for the sake of being cruel is truly kind of what my mantra is.
Profound indeed. Tell the people what's going on. Hey everyone. We're doing a little bit on our sister podcasts, on our podcast sisters who are just absolutely fabulous. 1, 2, absolutely gracious. It has been sister shows like the OC Diaries that have kept us, encouraged and motivated as like, in a professional way, but also as like in a friendship way, in a way that we're just like seeing how we can create community right now, and it's just been absolutely lovely. Thank you both so much for joining me tonight.
Thank you for having us, and thank you for being on our show as well.
Oh,
We've done the little trading spaces.
Oh,
here.
The switcheroo. Is
that show still on?
Absolutely better be. It's
especially now.
Yeah, like go see it.
Go
link
into bio. Homes.
Yes.
Right now.
The link is in the bio. Go see it right now. I had a wonderful time on your show talking about activism and anxiety, or activism with anxiety. With that being said, let's talk about how the OC Diaries developed. What are the OC Diaries? What am I talking about?
But what are we talking about? Suze, do you want to go first?
Oh, sure. I can talk about how it started. I guess about a year and a half ago, Maia and I decided to do a show, like an actual live performance about growing up with OCD. And so it was a devised piece. So we kind of wrote our own monologues. We did a little bit of improv. We did a little bit of audience interaction. And that was called, what was that called? The What If?
It was called the What If Project.
Original name, because we were sort of basing it on like the fears that you have with OCD. Like, what if I, left my door unlocked? What if I left my stove on? What if everyone hates me? So we did that at like a festival in Philly in I think May of 2019, and so our plan was to do it again and revamp it.
Is that where you guys like? Is that where I would have seen like a trailer, or like when I saw like there's like clips from the live show?
I did post clips from the live show. There's one of me singing a fear song. So we really wanted it to be.
I love that.
To put it in like a comedic lens, so to speak. So we created these like alter egos, these fear experts that sort of are the narrators of the show, and they're different, they're versions of ourselves. So we really play technically 2 characters in this live production where it's us, these 2 like people who are basically hosting a TED talk essentially on like the importance of fear, why it's so great, and kind of what OCD is also, because there is a lot of misconception about what obsessive compulsive disorder is. We hear the words OCD and don't even know that it necessarily stands for obsessive compulsive disorder, because it's used as an adjective sometimes to describe like
slang almost for like being
organized.
For being organized, or
like having little quirks.
Yeah, like so OCD. Whoa, like
perfectionist.
So OCD, and exactly, and so that's actually what gave Susanna the idea to change our show title to So OCD in our second staging of it, which was going to happen at the Tank in New York City. We were very excited. It would have been a year after our first performance, obviously, and the Tank was so wonderful.
That's a great.
with it all. You know, when Broadway sank, they were like, you know what, don't lose hope. We'll still be here when we're all ready to come back. And we were like, okay, yes, we knew this was coming.
That's
So
awesome.
how can we still talk about OCD and maybe put aspects of our show to the masses now? So you know, OC Diaries was another quarantine child, just like A Star Is Born was similarly. And it was really intended to talk about how OCD and people with anxiety disorders in general were affected by this pandemic, because, you know, all of a sudden, everyone was a little bit OCD. Everyone was washing their hands and overdoing it on the hand sanitizer, and being able to, this ability, like Susanna and I are talking about, you can speak to this a little bit more too, but this ability to like track germs that we have, of like, we can see, oh, you know, Susie touched the doorknob, and I know that before that Susie like went to the bathroom. What if she didn't wash her hands? Like things like that we can go like super far back, whereas like I hesitate to use the
contact
word.
tracing. You're like contact
Yeah,
tracing almost. Yeah,
exactly. Whereas like someone else maybe just wouldn't think too hard about that. So suddenly, while everyone was, you know, participating in those kinds of behaviors that to us were a daily thing, but that we were also working really hard to try and overcome. Like for me personally, the hand washing is really big, and I was, you know, I do it so frequently, and it's something that I have to try and work towards, and I have worked in years of therapy to try and, you know, overcome, not make it such a big part of my life, not make it a detriment, so to speak. And then, you know, suddenly there's a real reason. There's a real tangible reason besides my, you know, magical thinking, my what if I, you know, touch this bug and turn into it some kind of sauce, like to be washing my hands. So it was almost like validating of my disorder, and that was kind of scary. So we wanted to just sort of provide this platform for us to both like rant about it, but also to talk to other people who, and their experiences during quarantine and how that's affected them.
Absolutely. I love that, that the way that you articulated that, because I remember when for your first episode, you guys talk about that, like where it's like everything we've been talking about since the show dropped has come to fruition, and it's validating all of the fears that I've had. And we've seen this time do that to a lot of people, you know, and it's relatable though. It's relatable to be like, see, this is what I was afraid of. Now I'm sitting here facing it in like the most real way, you know, and having to overcome the fear of it to get to the next moment. I'm going to have you all continue speaking, but I just want to say like how absolutely necessary this message is at this time right now, you know? So continue. I love this, love this. I didn't get a chance to like talk about how awesome the show is when we were all together. So yeah, major props. I want to hear more about the process, the show, Susanna's perspective.
Oh, sure. Yeah, well, I wanted to add to that, what you were both saying about how, on the one hand, it's sort of, I mean, in like a sick way, it's nice to be validated. Like, yeah, we were right. You do need to do all these things. But at the same time, it's also terrifying because not only the real threat of the pandemic, but also like having been someone who spent so many years in, you know, in therapy and like working to undo all of those like irrational fears. So now
validated, you know,
now it's like being flipped on its head, and it's like, well, what am I supposed to? It's hard to not go overboard. It's hard to just kind of be like, okay, yeah, I have to wash my hands after I do this thing. But because we have that, our brains already work that way of like taking everything too far and letting anything turn into an obsession. It's hard to like know where to draw the line.
Absolutely. And that is something that I think again connects right back to our reality now, you know, having to know what the line is. Where is the line, you know? I think that's the first question you want to ask when drawing, I guess, said line, before you're going down like any rabbit holes or what have you. So I I just like, I really feel like also we need to have more talks about accessibilities in theater, and abilities in theater. Just in general.
Your phone stopped working for a second.
Yeah, I was like, did you mute yourself or?
No, it was my Dawn computer.
Oh wow.
Yeah, no, it's funny because a lot of what has sparked, I think, speaking for myself personally, my mental health has not been doing so hot this year, and I'm sure that goes for many other people. And it's nice to have that solidarity of like I've been more outspoken about my OCD just in these last few months than I have been in my entire life. And part of that is absolutely horrifying because it's like, these really freaking weird things about what goes on in my head.
Yes.
But it's also like I'm finding out that there are other people who do have those thoughts, and that's really cool. I mean, it sucks for us, but it's also really cool.
It's you can build a better community. You can build, like, they keep us separated so we don't build a community. They isolate people with mental illnesses, as opposed to like when there's studies that say people with mental illness thrive better in community, because as human beings we learn to adapt to certain things. I'd love to see more communities being supported and funded, as opposed to privatized and corrupted into like turning like prisons. And why is prison the largest mental health
it's the place
provider, service
exactly.
provider in our country? Like, that's really like
those are our options. It's ridiculous. Yeah,
exactly. So I just think talking about mental health and wellness is essential right now.
Well, and I remember when I first met Susanna, well, we went to college together. We went to Hampshire College.
Yes, let's get into history.
And we were both, theater kids, those classic theater majors.
Yes.
And I was working on, this is when we really became friends. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Susanna, but we really became friends when I was working on her senior thesis, which was an immersive production of Peter Pan called Second Star. It was fabulous. We loved doing, experimental immersive productions and rethinking like perspectives of stories that have already been told. So we were all into that kind of theater. And we were having a meeting in her dorm, and I'm like lying on the floor, chilling out as you do in dorm rooms in college. And I see on her bookshelf the OCD workbook. And I say, I have that book. And there sparked our discussion of suddenly I had this, ally in OCD that I could speak to and be like, oh, what is it like for you? Because it's different for everyone. It's different just between me and Susanna too, like what it manifests as, and finding out how it turns out for other people too is really fascinating. Because I also studied neuroscience, so I was like really interested in how the brain works both on a scientific and chemical sense, but also on a theatrical and artistic sense.
Love that.
Maia, I forgot that happened. Like that was like how that first came up, but I love that tidbit a lot. Full disclosure, I really sucked at doing that workbook. I don't think I ever actually
I never did it.
Yeah, I never did it, but I had it because my parents got it for me when I was a kid.
Me too.
But I don't think I ever actually did. I maybe went through like the first 1 or 2 pages and I was like, I don't want to do it. Because, a lot of avoidance with that stuff of like having that kind of front.
It's a lot having a mental illness, the idea and the like emotions that come with a mental illness thrust upon you as a child, or as in both ways. It's a little traumatizing, I'll say, like to find out that's something.
We were both so young when we were like experiencing this and like diagnosed with this, and it's very weird having this when you're young. Like I had never heard of it before. I think that people might as they get old, like nowadays the term OCD is just thrown around very casually,
which is so because it hadn't even had a chance to enter society as like a valid mental illness that, like, you know, that people suffer and struggle to overcome, so they can have meaningful lives. That's what people want, you know, the most. And we want to say that we want to provide that, you know, for folks, but like when any illness is thrust upon you, you realize, like, I'm going to be different from so many people.
Yeah.
And it's going to be for a reason that is out of my control. It's out of their control, that, you know, we have so far to go, but like, I appreciate hearing about that experience and the experience of you two coming together and forming community. Like, maybe like, let's definitely talk about more on that. I'm just loving listening right now. So like, you know, whatever to talk about.
I think that's been the part of this whole thing that's been for me, is just like getting to like becoming closer with Maia and getting to like talk about these. Like, I have met other people with OCD in my life for sure, but I don't think there's been anyone else that I've like, that there's been this much like vulnerability with. I mean, there are things like that we don't talk about on the show, but just in our like one-on-one chats, like we had a talk last night where it was just, and we hadn't really had that kind of talk in a while. Maia, you can, you know, jump in, but yeah, having someone to like, because for years and years, it's a very isolating thing, especially when you're young. And the only people who know about it are your parents, because you don't know how to talk to your friends about it. So it's a very isolating thing. So to come to a point where you're not only comfortable enough to talk to people about it, but and whether it's people who have been there or not, but then to have someone say like, oh yeah, I had those same weird ass thoughts too, is like, it just feels so good. Because it is, I mean, I think like, obviously, like, we know a lot of people with depression, we know a lot of people with anxiety, but this is a very specific thing that like it doesn't function in the way that typical anxiety does or depression does, but it can cause both of those things, and it has for me. So because it's just it's the ways that it manifests can like seemingly are so weird when you're, especially because now I'm just going to go on like a tangent about this, because the way that OCD is, when you do see it in like TV or movies, it is very like one note. It's very, because it's a lot easier to show compulsions than obsessions. So like I remember in an episode, like I remember in an episode of Scrubs, there's like a doctor who has OCD, and he can't leave at the end of the night unless he's turned the light on and off like 100 times, which is a valid form of it for some people. But I just remember being a kid and watching that and being like, what? I don't do that. Like,
is that what it's supposed to be like? Like, wait a second.
I was like, am I doing it wrong? Because that was never really me. For me, like, I think for the most part, when I was younger, you wouldn't look at me and know I had anything, because I didn't have a lot of like quirks. It was all internal. It was all basically like having a thought that scared me in some way or worried me, and then not being able to let it go and having it consume everything. And just spending like days at a time being in this very, very dark place, because over and over again this thought in my head was like, you're gonna die, or like whatever it was. I remember that. I mean, it's changed, the content of the thoughts have changed over the years, but I remember when I was 10, that was like when my parents were like, we're gonna take you to a therapist, because like basically I was 10, and like for weeks I was just like convinced. I was like, Mom and Dad, like, I'm gonna die, like my thoughts are telling me I'm gonna die, and I think it's gonna come true. And they were like, okay, so we're a little concerned, but that's a very hard thing to like show, and that's absolutely, and it's not as quirky as organizing your
head. They would have you think, as Hollywood would have you think, you know, having mental illness is not as you know, clear cut as we see it. And I will definitely say, like, I've been both encouraged and, you know, of course I have to think of everything critically, but I've been quite encouraged to see more, you know, much like your shows that are centering experiences, like having an experience with mental illness, and not just like on TV and what have you. My friend was just telling me about a Twitch streamer who's like a girl streamer, so she's already got like strikes against her, but she's you know, she's overcoming constantly her bouts of Tourette's, for instance, and like fully does her show, you know, and streams and gets support from folks and is honest, and it has this beautiful clear cut message that she's like, you know, she's absolutely lovely. It's just been really encouraging, but so past time where we are celebrating folks for their differences and in their differences. So maybe, I'm not entirely sure how much time we have left, but I do want to talk maybe more about like representation in theater, like what it is you ladies like want to see more of.
Yeah, I mean, my thoughts about theater and media in general, in terms of accessibility, have changed drastically just over these months of quarantine. But oh gosh, I remember my parents trying to make me watch Monk, which was like the OCD icon on TV, Monk, and he was, you know, a murder detective. So if I see like dead people on TV, I will like be worried that I will contract like that contamination. So my parents were really excited because they found, you know, an OCD person that they could show this to me. I'm sitting there like, I'm gonna have to shower for 45 minutes after watching this show. But just some piggybacking off of what we were talking about before. But yeah, no, in terms of, I was so nervous about doing this show, and I can't remember, like, I wanted so badly to find an outlet, to find a way to portray OCD in a way that was both like relatable, but also real, but also kind of absurdist in a way. Because when if I were to just look at, you know, take a step out of my body and look at, you know, my thoughts of OCD, like there's some kind of hilarious things that are going on too. And I think just my tone in general is a very like ironic, sarcastic things, and my time spent in college when I was doing theater was really like about learning how to play myself, like play your own story on stage, and that's a super challenging thing, but I think it's really important because theater is, you know, where we grow empathy. So for this show, for our stage show, like I said, it's kind of an amalgamation of these pieces that we wrote, just Susanna and I, on our own time, and through conversations with each other, where we're just really just talking about what it was like and what it is like to this day, and working off of each other to find the language that, you know, sort of started to scratch the surface. But it's hard because a lot of the things that, like Sus was saying, it's easy to portray like washing my hands, flipping the light switch, but the you know, neurons that are firing and the you know, tracking of what's actually going on in my brain, what causes me to do that, it's not only scary to say, but it's just hard to explain. Or at least I grew up thinking that no one else was going to understand. And when I got older, there were certain compulsions. There were like, you know, I went through certain phases, like my OCD kind of evolves, like the fears evolve over the years. And there were times when I would have bad days, my anxiety was bad, and I'd feel like I couldn't drive by a cemetery. And if I was driving with a friend, I'd like, if I felt comfortable enough, I would be like, hey, this is a thing that I have. I don't like driving by cemeteries because I'm afraid if I'm, you know, makes me uncomfortable. I started using words like uncomfortable, like not directly, I think I'm gonna die, but
not
like
expressing that they're like, this is like a debilitating uncomfortable.
But they understood, and I was like, okay, because I think all of us are hardwired with this superstition, right? And
it's natural.
Some of OCD, like the way I describe it is like superstition amped up to very extreme levels. So sorry, I know I sort of went off topic there, but
no, this is,
you know,
I think that what you said is so powerful. I want you to continue, please. Like, I think we have a lot of folks who need to hear this exactly. You know, this, you know, the idea of like saying how you're feeling, speaking up, expressing, you know, this, you know, expressing yourself as best you can, because I can actually follow that, you know, the idea of it just being like a superstition that you have, that's like, it's like it's not quite just a superstition, but here's a great way for, you know, just people without OCD to understand what it's like. If you've ever had a superstition, if you've ever been like paranoid because you like smoked like 8 joints or whatever, you know, that's up to you, you know, like, how can we put that in media respectfully, 1, and 2, fully, holistically, or, you know,
well, and honestly, just like that, finding the ways that that these feelings are universal, and, you know, explaining both the ways that they connect to how other people might be feeling, but also, you know, there's uniqueness to it too. And sometimes it's okay to just have people shut up and listen. And so that's what I had to accept. And that's also the advice I think that I have been giving other people who have spoken to me throughout this process about like wanting to come, you know, talk about their OCD too. It's like, odds are there's someone out there who feels similarly or has something similar going on. And so it's a matter of finding that brave space for yourself to step up and do it. And I think I wanted to address just quickly the fact that we're living in this technological age during quarantine where theater has, you know, changed completely, but also in a way become more accessible because we are able to reach, I mean, that's a very like broad term because, you know, it depends on internet levels, it depends on a lot of things, but in the sense that you can reach more people and people that are in different places from you, and for free if you are feeling so inclined. I know we artists got to make a living, and we're really fucking am I allowed to curse? We're really fucking struggling right now.
Hello.
All of us are, but that doesn't stop us from making. At least for me, I can't stop creating. So it's gonna go somewhere.
I feel that.
Yeah, Suze, you want to talk to that too?
Yeah, I think like the example you used of the person who has Tourette's who's talking about it on her, was it a show or her?
It's like her Twitch streaming.
Yeah, us talking about our OCD. I think the important thing about representation is having the people who actually have these things and have had these experiences be the ones to talk about it, and not have someone who like has a stereotype of it write about it.
Right.
Or either having either people who really have these mental disorders talking about their experiences, or at the very least, like if you want to write about that, do your research and talk to people who have had these experiences, have them help you work on it, so that you're not just doing the stereotypes or like the easy things that everyone thinks that these things are supposed to be, because then that creates a false idea of what it is, which is just dangerous in a lot of ways, because it does it gives us that language of like, I'm OCD, and just throwing that around, which is hurtful to us. But then it's isolating to the people who actually have these things, because if you're young and the only representation you're seeing is a stereotype that doesn't fit with what you have, you won't know that that's what it is, and you won't have a way to talk about it, and you won't feel reassured knowing like, oh, okay, like this, I relate to this.
It's almost a shutdown, like I'm not OCD enough. If that's what your perception of OCD is, then clearly, like like you said before, I'm doing something wrong, or my thoughts are too weird. My stuff's too weird to talk about.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly what it was. Like, well, I guess my thoughts are fucking too, like, they're so fucked up that like no one has them but me, because that's how I felt. You know,
I'm like blown away by the way you two are articulating this. We're talking about now is just like, I think it's just really relevant. It's very, again, relatable, connecting to the time. So like, but we can definitely do final thoughts and close the show for the people at home. But like, yeah, let's thoughts. Let's talk about some final thoughts.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Oh, sorry. I start.
I was like, who has the final thought?
Got it.
You
This
got
is
it?
a preview for the episode.
Anyone?
Is that you, Suze? Who? Yep, right.
Who? I mean, I don't know if I have a final thought.
Right. Yeah.
Which is
fair. This is an ongoing conversation.
Exactly. Yeah. I feel like there's nothing that I can say to perfectly wrap it up. Mm-hmm. Other than like, I feel very, very happy that this is something that I've come to a point in my life that I'm comfortable talking openly about, and I am glad to have found people that I can talk about it with. So I guess my final thought is just like I this is exciting, and I want to keep having these conversations. And if people have experienced the same things that we have, if anyone sees this and they, you know, can relate to this, then like to please reach out to us, because there's nothing makes me happier than like, you know, providing some reassurance that like people aren't alone, you know. So
Yeah, that's what your show's all about, you know.
that's my thought.
While you guys are both in character, both of you ladies are in character, I see so much of you come through in the show, where you know, even in the podcast, there's a level of like in being in character that you both have, which I think is so like, that is theater to me. That is theater, and that's something you can only like embrace when you embrace yourself. You know, you can not only face it, but you can tell the world, you know, show the world who you really are. You know, bringing your actual experience to the forefront of the conversation, because I feel like we see you know, mental illness through I think maybe we can use feminist theory and go through the white male gaze, sort of, where you're like, oh, that person is swinging neurotically, and then it's just like, well, you should care because they have autism, and it's just like, oh, okay. And it's like we're getting a manufactured an idea of mental illness based on, you know, like, isn't this weird? We can't make it people into human beings, literally, into like kind of a side performance, or like a performative thing. So, you know, just talking about people who actually have to go through and live their lives with mental illness, writing their own content, acting in their own content, in their own experience, and being able to bring that actual experience out, as opposed to having people who's just like, can you go there? It's like, can I go? Can you asking an actor without this mental illness that doesn't experience the world like this at all to go where exactly? Yeah. Into a full stereotype, into like a full caricature of what I'm supposed to think and what I want to reinforce in the minds of many people, to think about people who struggle with a certain mental illness. So now when I see someone who doesn't fit that category, I invalidate them. I'm like, there's no way you have OCD. You know, you're not flicking the light switch off over and over again. And honestly, maybe you are, and that's okay.
Yeah, that's the problem that I've had too. Is it's nerve-wracking, because you don't want to be gatekeeping OCD in the way that we were our whole lives with, you know, this is the stereotype of OCD, and anything else is kind of weird, like, because there's no, because you don't know that anyone else thinks this way if all you're seeing is like Miss Pillsbury on Glee being, you know,
Right.
cleaning her grapes, which
I was just thinking of her.
again, our OCD icons. Yeah, but I'm glad you mentioned, when I was in therapy a long time ago when I was a child, like, I remember this thing that really changed my perception of my disorder. I always cringe a little bit on the word disorder. Don't know why. We'll probably I'll get into that later on in some other way.
Unpack that later.
But I was invited to start thinking, and maybe it's because I was very young. I had an overactive imagination. I still do to this day. Maybe that's why I do theater. But I was invited to think about my OCD as this separate character, like this. Imagine them as a separate entity to you, and as someone who's scared and who needs love and reassurance. And I've been, you know, told my whole life to just, you know, fight OCD, like that it was a bully, that it was bullying me, and you know, and not the real me. But when in reality, it is a part of me. It's not going anywhere. It needs, you know, it needs tending, just like any part of you does, in order to become the best that you can be. But it's hard when we think of mental illness in general as something that is an affliction that's going to go away, or that needs to be shooed or beaten down.
Or fixed, or fixed, you know?
Exactly.
That is so many people need to hear that. Not even
I hope they do.
I needed to hear that. That's beautiful. That's
glad.
absolutely beautiful. That's like that's a place people, like even I, you know, am currently learning about that. And I've also been trying to avoid saying struggling with mental illness, like using that phrasing, because it's
not always a struggle.
It's not always a struggle.
It's just how you are. Sometimes it's just like, this is my person. Yeah.
I would say faster, like experiencing mental illness or navigating life with mental illness, because we're all navigating life, you know, in our own ways. And some of us have hindrances like that are not like other folks, you know.
And sometimes it's a part of yourself, but it's not all of who you are. And I mean, depending on the level, obviously some people it's severe enough that it really does affect your day-to-day function, but for some people it's like,
define you as a person.
Me, I live with every day, and I've learned to like live my life with this, you know.
Circle it all back to just our show, both our stage show and what the OC Diaries, what our hope for it was, and what it is and what it will be too. You know, I think that's why I personally wanted to, or it found it easier to, I guess, portray both myself, but also this like kind of absurdist comical version of myself as well. Just because like I recognize that there are different perspectives to look at. There are different perspectives within me, and all of us, and exploring what those are and exploring different ways of looking at something that like most people would consider a struggle. Like these fear experts that we're playing, like they're saying yes, fear. They're like, this is, you know, important and it's great, and you know, we
just like we predicted. Yeah.
and we cut between that, and we cut between just, you know, ourselves too. And so that's what you know, I hope we get to perform this show again live, because it's so impactful to do it in a room full of people where we can actually have like conversations and do these things with you know, breathing voices. But also, as Susanna was saying, we love having people on our YouTube show, which really is just you know, a space for us to both play these characters, but also we've been on hiatus a little bit since your show, and when we come back, we're going to take, you know, go back to reset ourselves a little bit and take it at this more educational angle too, because we're realizing, you know, not everyone knows what OCD is. Susanna and I have been talking about this with each other for years now, and we almost forgot to like step back and say, first of all,
what do you know about this? What do you know? Yeah. I think that's excellent. And
we're excited to come back.
Yeah, and we're hoping to find more people to interview who have OCD. It's definitely been, I mean, it's been harder, partly because not everyone is open about it, so we don't exactly know like who to ask. And say like, hey, do you have this? Do you want to come talk openly about it? For people,
I mean, I hope that something that like, you know, is said on a Stars board can. I would like I want this cross-pollination, you know, of our folks, you know.
Send us all your obsessive compulsives.
Send them our way. We'll take you.
We're calling all.
Talk to them. We want to have chats.
Hear you.
Not their darkest thoughts.
Please. Share.
Deepest and darkest.
Or not. Whatever they're comfortable with, you know.
And I think that would be excellent. I hope that like folks are listening out there and they're just like, oh snap, wait a second. Hold up. Wait a minute. These are people who are just casually, comfortably talking about the same experience I have among theater kids. Can you imagine like you know, any OCD theater kids or theater kids with OCD, who can listen and be like, oh snap, like this is like, you know, look at what these two are doing. What you guys are doing is revolutionary work. In my humble opinion, telling your story, by telling your stories, you have opened doors. By telling your stories, you have
it seems like such a simple thing, but it's not. And we really, our goal is to provide space for other people to do that. Now that we've theater's an experiment. So we're throwing things out. Susanna and I are having these conversations, and we're trying to find, accessible ways of telling our story. And we hope that does inspire people to do the same. We know it's not easy, and sometimes you're going to try and fail, and people will see it and be like, I don't what are you trying to say here? But that's the beauty. That's the beauty of art in general and storytelling. So yes, please, if you or a loved one wants to talk, and we're really chill. Hopefully, in real life, we're very chill. So we'd love to help you tell your story, and we'd love to listen. And Mariah, thank you for having us on A Star Is Born. I feel very honored to even have this platform and to share it with your amazing self.
Same here. You two are phenomenal, women that are just doing it right now. And with me and Keith, Star Is Born is better, because of you. We are able to challenge and have that voice available, when you guys are, of course, ready and able to share yourselves with us in those ways. And this is the kind of stuff that I think builds community, reinterprets the idea of theater, and like you said, theater being an experiment. It's just this ongoing experiment. That's just beautiful, honestly.
There's no such thing as don't suffer for your art, just grow for your art. Okay.
Oh!
That's my message. That's how I want to tie it up in a bow.
Nice one, Maya.
I didn't even want want it to feel like a bow tie, but that was a bow tie I've ever seen.
You did it perfectly.
It was absolutely perfectly executed. There's no more to say except for
thank you for having us.
Thank you
to be here.
Yeah, oh my gosh, always I love talking to both of you so much, so I appreciate having this time to do so.
Let us know in the comments if you just want us to just just chat.
Keep talking for 5 years.
We'll do it.
Fuck yeah.
We're not going anywhere. We're good little quarantiners, so.
Yeah, we're really
this
not
is
going
our void. We're yelling into.
I'm not going on a cruise anytime soon. Not going to the beach.
Right, exactly. I have nothing to do. Let's do this. No, seriously, I would definitely like to do more, talks and stuff, maybe once we start, making some, some money, Star Is Born can sponsor some conversations to be had, about mental health and theater.
It's big, and we're not gonna ever tackle it in even in one night, let alone 5 years. Who knows?
Okay, right.
But there's so much to say, and I love talking about it. So.
I love talking to both of you. You're amazing. Where can we find you? I want to do the whole ending.
Oh, where can they find us, Susanna? Where can they find us?
Well, we're on Instagram as _OCD show. Mm-hmm. Our YouTube channel, I guess you would say, is the OCD Diaries. So that's OCD and then IARIES.
Right, pronounce
and then if you want to follow our individual Instagrams, you can follow me at HolubAckGirl, HOLUBACKGRRL.
And I'm Maia LaBeouf. Really, yes, that's correct. I'm married to Shia. We also have a Facebook page if people still use Facebook.
Yes, I always forget because I don't people do.
All right, well, I still use, I'm an old lady. I still use Facebook.
There's also the OCD Diaries.
So we're just going to dance it out right now. I hope you all had a good time.
Yeah. Going down to the Star Is Born Club.
That's right.